The Nigerian government has revealed it will be submitting a 26.1 trillion naira budget to the National Assembly for approval. The 2024 budget, if passed by the National Assembly, will be the highest in the history of the country and would also see a further rise in the cost of debt servicing and other budgetary allocations. Also, the country's Bureau of Statistics announced inflation in the country has hit an 18-year high rate of 26.72%. Food inflation also currently sits at over 30%, showing the current economic challenges in the country. As the budget keeps rising, the Nigerian government also has to deal with an ever-increasing cost of living, leaving Nigerians with the questions: what is the 26.1 trillion naira budget all about? How will it fix the struggling and dipping economy? On Politics HQ tonight, we will be looking at the issues concerning the 2024 proposed budget and the current inflation. Now, joining me for this discussion is Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Chief Executive Officer at the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. And one welcome to you, Dr. Yusuf, and thanks for joining us on Politics HQ.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Now, Dr. Yusuf, Nigeria recently experienced a substantial increase in its headline inflation rate, reaching 26.72% in September 2023. Could you kindly provide us with an analysis of what this figure means for the Nigerian economy and its citizens?
Well, high inflation is very bad for the economy, is bad for investors, and it's also bad for the citizens. For the citizens, from the point of view of the impact on their welfare and impact on their purchasing power. But the implication of that is that over the last 1 year, their real income has been reduced by 26.7%. And actually, in reality, I think the situation is much worse than that. But even if we relate to the official data, that is quite devastating. And if there is anything that accelerates poverty, it is inflation. So if we talk about poverty getting worse, it is because inflation is getting higher and purchasing power of the citizens have been significantly eroded. Then on the part of the citizens and on the part of businesses, the implication is that cost of production is going higher, cost of operation is also getting higher, prices of their products will also increase, and in some cases, they are not even able to pass on the entire additional cost to their customers. That means it will lead to the erosion of their profit margins, it reduces sales, it reduces turnover. So from whichever angle you look at it, it is not a good story to tell at all if you have inflation at this level and it keeps going higher.
Not a good look at all. Now, Dr. Yusuf, looking at the newly released figures from the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, the NBS food inflation appears to be a significant contributor to the overall inflation rate, standing at high 30.64%. Could you elaborate on the specific food items that have been driving this inflation and why are they particularly important? We produce quite an ample amount of food in Nigeria. So what reasons might be driving this inflation and what's its implication for households and families?
Well, the impact of the food inflation has basically been on the staple food that we consume. We are talking of grains, rice, maize, millets, noodles, rice, bread, sugar, and things like that. Those are the things.
What's driving this inflation?
Come again?
What's driving this high food inflation rate?
Well, the factors are obvious. First, you have the high costs of transportation. because most of these products are moved from one part of the country to the other by road. And most of the trucks that move these food items are powered by diesel. And as you know, diesel is currently over 1,000 naira per liter. And the transporters are business people, so they have to factor this into their transport costs. The owners of the food items will factor that into the prices of food. So we are faced with very serious impact of high transport costs on food prices, on food inflation. Then the second major factor is what we call the exchange rate pass-through. That is the impact of the exchange rate depreciation on food items. Now, there are quite a number of food items that has very high import components. An example is bread. Bread is produced from wheat, and wheat is imported. So to the extent that the cost of the importation of wheat, the cost of importation of sugar, for instance, all of these things affect some processed foods. We are talking of noodles, we are talking of bread, and some other things like that. Those things require foreign exchange. And currently, there's no liquidity in the official window for majority of the players to source foreign exchange at 770. So most of them are sourcing at currently over 1,000 naira per dollar. So that also has a very significant implication. Then you have the problem of insecurity. The limited amount of food items that are produced locally are also now being impeded or being hampered by insecurity in many of our food producing locations around the country. So that is affecting supply. So basically, these are the key drivers of inflation. So if you must tackle it, I think these are the critical things that you need to begin to look at.
Now, I'll pick up from where you left off, Dr. Yusuf. You said if you must tackle it, and the laws of physics says that anything that goes up must come down. Are there any bright spots? Is there light at the end of a tunnel? Can this inflationary rate be reversed? Are there things the government can do to reduce prices in light of this high inflation rate that has cost millions of Nigerians who struggle to afford essential goods?
Well, the options are very limited for government because quite a number of the variables are not exactly within the control of government. If you take energy prices, for instance, because we are not refining domestically, these energy products, diesel, PMS, aviation fuel, to some extent even gas, are imported. And the prices are driven by international oil price. I will know what international oil price is currently. These things are driven by geopolitical factors, the Russia and Ukraine issue. Now we are having some geopolitical issues in the Middle East, Israel and Hamas and the Palestinians. So we don't know how that will pan out as we progress, but the tension is already beginning to build. So these are factors outside our control. So there's very little we can do. The exchange rate is also a function of our capacity to add foreign exchange. We are not able to add much foreign exchange, therefore the CBN cannot sufficiently intervene in the foreign exchange market. So we have a crisis there. So the only thing I think the government can do is to, work or tweak some of our tariff policy measures. I'm talking of import duty and taxes. So if the government can identify some critical food processors, those in the agreed value chain, have an engagement with them and see what kind of fiscal policy incentives or concession that we can give to them so that their costs can come down. And of course, if we're able to accelerate the process of domestic refining of petroleum products, that may bring down the cost of diesel and PMS.
Now,
those are the options we have.
Following up on your energy suggestions, refining and trying to reduce energy costs, could you suggest a way or provide a view of how energy costs affect inflation and the broader economy? And what steps can be taken or measures to mitigate these challenges?
No, energy cost is a big issue. When you talk of energy, you are talking of fuel. Look at the cost of PMS. A lot of businesses use PMS for purposes of production to service their offices, especially the SMEs. Many businesses also depend on diesel, either to power their premises, to power their machines. Then many vehicles also use diesel, especially these big, trucks that convey food items and other raw materials across the country. They also use diesel. So these things, the increase in the prices of these energy components or energy elements feed into the increases in price of food items as well as other items generally. So it's a major driver of inflation. Therefore, if the government is able to do something concrete first about electricity, because in the last few months we have been seeing very serious challenges with electricity, at least that should be within our control. We cannot afford to leave electricity exclusively to the private sector. You can see that investors in that space are struggling. And because of the critical strategic importance of electricity, government needs to intervene one way or the other to ensure that the citizens have power. If you have power supply, there will be less dependence on diesel, there will be less dependence on PMS. And that can also bring down the costs, the inflation from the energy perspective. The same thing with aviation fuel, the same thing with other components of energy. Then the government can also look at even the renewable energy components. We have the solar panels, we have the inverters and things like that. For citizens that want to be on their own and want to rely less either on generator or the discos, they can set up their own solar system, solar solutions. But we need to make it affordable. So we can crash or remove all the tariffs on solar panels, on inverters, on all these renewable energy solutions. That is another way of dealing with this problem.
The current administration, led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has constituted an economic team. There's a new central bank governor, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy. But the government is facing a trifecta of economic challenges, which include rising inflation, which we've been discussing this evening, debt management, and a forex crisis, which you mentioned. What strategies should be considered to navigate this complex economic landscape? And knowing that the team has just been constituted, when should Nigerians expect to start seeing results, and how do we assess the progress made by, what yardsticks should we use to determine if these new team and these policies are working? How much time should we give them?
Well, I think we need to start with the average Nigerian. Because with the average Nigerian, the issue is not about GDP or about money supply growth or about all of these economic jargons. It's about high cost of food. It's about high cost of energy. It's about high cost of transportation and high cost of logistics. Those are primary concerns of the average Nigerian. Yes, we have seen some reforms, and those reforms are inevitable, we agree. The reforms are corrective reforms, we agree. But we need an effective social safety net, because the reforms have come with very severe social outcomes, which require more, very quick response, more accelerated response than we have seen so far. So the government to respond very quickly through a combination of policies, through engagement with stakeholders in the food production chain, in the energy supply chain, and in the transportation chain. If the government engages with them And government lays out its objective of quickly responding to the pains of the citizens. I'm sure a lot of practical solutions will emerge that the government can run with. Then on the other bigger issues of the macroeconomic issues, like inflation, like the exchange rate, these are fundamental issues. Some of these things are legacy problems, which the administration inherited. There are things that need to be dealt with through some fundamental economic reforms, some of which have started. But we need to ensure that we bring back confidence of investors, in a way that we should be able to attract more foreign exchange into this economy. And the starting point is to clear all this foreign exchange backlog. We need to prioritize it. We need to see what we can do with our oil production so that the inflow of foreign exchange from the oil sector, which is our main source of foreign exchange, can improve. Right now, we are operating at a suboptimal level. So if we improve our capacity for oil production, that will help. Then we can look at our assets. If there are assets that can attract equity investment from foreign investors so that they can invest equity and bring in foreign exchange into the economy, that will also help. Then last resort is for us to resort to IMF and see how we can get some support, balance of payment support, to bridge the current huge gap that we have in our balance of payment situation and in our foreign exchange environment. So those are the things that can be done, particularly on the foreign exchange side.
Now, Dr. Yusuf, you did talk, when you started answering my last question, you mentioned the common man, the average Nigerian that is not interested in economic jargons, and a lot of them in the lower rung of society who don't have the financial muscle to withstand the shock of these policies need money. They need some level of social safety net. You did talk about effective social safety net. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu today launched the Renewed Hope Conditional Cash Transfer Program, and it's noteworthy. Could you elaborate on the program's objectives, its expected impact, particularly in light of the removal of the fuel subsidies? How much difference would it make to this 15 million Nigerians who will be beneficiaries of this conditional cash transfer program?
Well, I don't believe so much in cash transfers because first, it's not sustainable. You can only do it for maybe a short while, and you suspend it, and everybody goes back to status quo. Second, it is not systemic, in my view, because we are talking about a population of 200 million people. 70% or more of them are in poverty. So we are talking about over 100 million people. So when we give cash transfer to 15 million people, I mean, how material is that? So I have my issues with that. I also have issues with the quality of our database.
Yes, but Dr. Yusuf, you're not just, the government can't turn a blind eye to this demography and say, okay, we're going to wait for the economy to pick up and all of that. What is the alternative to this conditional cash transfer, in your opinion?
That is the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to lay a background. And the point I'm making is that in the environment where you use cash transfer, you have quality database. In US and some of these advances, you have quality database. Here, we don't have that kind of database. And the corruption risk with cash transfer is extremely high. So no matter what we say, the politicians will get involved, at various levels of our polity, and you know what it means. When politicians get involved as to who and who should be on that list. So those are the concerns that I have. And that is why I felt that an approach that is systemic, that is policy-driven, will be better. And that is why I talked about engaging stakeholders. We are talking about high cost of transportation. Let us engage investors, private sector investors in transportation. If we need to reduce import duty on vehicles that they import, let us do so. If you need to remove all the taxes and levies on CNG vehicles, CNG conversion kits, so that more people can convert easily to this so-called CNG, that will help. So that more people can do it. If you reduce the cost of some of these vehicles, because the tariffs on some of these vehicles are still very high. And you cannot have a weak exchange rate and high import duty at the same time. It will strangulate the citizens. We don't have control over exchange rates, but we have control over import duty. Look at all the buses on the road. Most of them are rickety. How do you allow your citizens to be going that kind of buses? So let us walk through policy, through the private sector, through incentives to improve our transportation space, to improve access to all the CNG and renewable energy, to improve the food situation. We should engage people who are in food processing, people who are producing noodles, who are producing bread. What can we do for them so that when these prices come down, everybody will benefit? So the approach has to be systemic. That is the point I'm making. Rather than just selecting people and say, I mean, you have over 100 million people in poverty. You're talking about 50 million people. How far can that go? And what is the process? What is the quality of your database? That is why I have issues with this cash transfer.
Now, Dr. Yusuf, the Nigerian government today revealed it will be submitting a 26.1 trillion naira budget to the National Assembly for approval. This budget will be the highest in the history of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What are your expectations from this budget, and what areas of the economy should the government prioritize in this proposed budget?
Well, we haven't seen the full breakdown yet, but areas of priority for us as a country is what we need to do to improve productivity, to improve production, to create an enabling environment for our citizens that are in production, that are doing business, so that they be in a better position to invest more and to create more jobs. And very critical to this is the provision of infrastructure. So we have to prioritize infrastructure. Yes, it is good to invite the private sector to invest in infrastructure, but government has to take the lead. That is the way it is all over the world, especially countries that are making progress with their economies. Government has to take the lead in infrastructure provision. Whether you are talking about roads, whether you are talking about electricity, whether you are talking about the railway system, those things are very critical, for the economy to be able to transform or to transit from what it is now to where we need to be. Then, of course, government needs to strengthen defense, because insecurity is still a major issue. And not just about throwing money at it, but also ensuring that we review the strategy and ensure that monies that are spent there are also spent judiciously. Only last week, we saw how a major general was court-martialed and accused of embezzling a fraud involving over $1 million. This is a major general in the army. These are some of the funds that we are supposed to use for security. So we need more vigilance. We need more audit system. We need more vigilance, to ensure more oversight, to ensure that even the monies we vote for various projects are also spent appropriately. That is very, very, very important. So security is key, because without security, we cannot revive our mining sector. We cannot revive our agricultural sector. So infrastructure, security, and of course, our social infrastructure, health and education, those are the basic things in a way that people will feel the impact, in a way that it is trickle down. For me, those are the basic, those are the normal priorities that I think we should expect. But of course, I know it's going to be challenging, because the cost of debt service is going to increase astronomically. Our debt has jumped from 46 trillion to 87 trillion. That's a jump of almost 75%. So that means that this debt service component of the budget is also going to increase. We'll be lucky if it doesn't get close to 10 trillion. How much revenue are we going to get? So there's a big burden on how to manage all this baggage that the government has also inherited.
Now, finally, Dr. Yusuf, in the face of these economic complexities, what comprehensive strategies do you believe are essential to restoring economic stability and easing the suffering of the Nigerian population?
No, what is important is to see how we tackle the fundamental macroeconomic issues in order to restore confidence in the system. And that will require that, well, our policies are right. Some of the policy steps have already started, which is good. Second, the government needs to be more responsive and quickly to the social outcomes of some of these reforms. For the citizens, yes, they welcome the reform, but they need to see that the government is also, conscious of the pains that they are going through. So we need to do something. We need to see something that is more systemic in nature, that has a better trickle-down effect. Then we need to address the issue of cost. Because when we are talking about debt, we are talking about deficit, it's a question of cost and it's a question of revenue.
When you say cost, are you talking about the cost of governance?
Cost of governance, yes. Cost of governance, quality of expenditure, quality of procurement, corruption. Those things are very critical. Because we can't have this kind of challenges and yet we are still having problems with corruption, we are still having problems with a bloated governance structure. It doesn't add up. So those things we have to move side by side. While we are trying to ramp up the revenue, we should also be doing something around our costs of governance. That is important so that you have what you call a fiscal consolidation, revenue and cost. We need to address the two simultaneously.
Now, looking forward, what key indicators or developments should Nigerians monitor closely as the country attempts to address its economic challenges? And no country is an island. What do we need to do to get international support and foreign direct investment? We floated the Naira and the subsidy regime has been removed. So what else needs to be done by this government to attract FDI?
Well, what needs to happen is to restore confidence, just as I said. If we're able to clear the backlog of the existing maturing obligations, that will inspire more confidence, because it's difficult to attract an investor to an environment where existing foreign investors have their funds stuck in the system. How do you convince them to come? So we need to sort out all these areas, those whose funds are stuck here, all this backlog, our letter of credit issues, the currency swap issue. Let us clean up the space. After that, then it will be easier for these foreign investors to go. But more importantly, we need to also create the environment even for domestic investors. We need to see what we can do quickly to reduce their cost of operation, their cost of energy, the power situation, the cost of logistics. Those things are critical also for domestic investors. Domestic investors are as important as foreign investors. So we must also come from that perspective.
Now, Dr. Yusuf, quickly, before I let you go, in the course of our discussion this evening, it's been centered around the federal government, but we do know that there are other federating units. We have local governments and state governments. Is there any way that can contribute to the growth of the economy and, making life better for the citizens of their states? What role can they play?
There's a lot they can do. They are the closest to the people, and their revenue situation has improved on account of fuel subsidy removal, on account of the foreign exchange convergence. So they should be able to do more for their citizens in the area of education, in the area of health, in the area of roads, in the area of rural roads, in the area of electricity. Luckily, we have decentralized electricity provision. They should be able to support their citizens with more cost-effective power solutions that could reach every nook and cranny of their states. They have a lot to do, and they need to be a lot more accountable to the citizens. They need to be more transparent. They should account for the resources that they get. And the state assemblies should also step up. They should not be seen as an appendage of the executive. They are there to serve the interests of the peoples of their state, so that there's better accountability as to the resources that they get, either at the state level or at the local government level. So it's a question of accountability.
Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Muda Yusuf, Chief Executive Officer, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. Always a pleasure speaking with you. We do appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my friend.
You're watching Politics HQ and News Central Television. We'll go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll look at the 2024 Edo State Governorship elections. Do stay with us. We'll be right back after this.